I am James Washington, 77 years old, and I had just poured my morning coffee when I heard tires crunching on the gravel driveway outside my house on Cedar Point Lake. Before I could reach the front door, my son Terrence walked in, followed by his wife Stephanie and my two grandchildren. 6 suitcases landed right in the middle of my living room, with heavy thuds that seemed to announce permanence rather than a visit. Stephanie didn't say hello, didn't ask how I was doing, just looked me straight in the eye and said, "You'll be moving downstairs. The upstairs is ours now." I smiled, not because of what she said, but because I already knew something wasn't right about this sudden visit. And if they'd known what I'd been preparing for moments exactly like this one, they might never have stepped through my door with such confidence. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. They didn't notice the way I kept my hands steady as I set my coffee cup down on the old oak table. 77 years of living teach you how to keep your face still, how to hold the air in your chest when someone tries to take it from you. Terrence was already heading up the stairs like he owned the place, brushing past the grandfather clock I'd inherited from my father. His steps had that purposeful weight of a man who'd made a decision without consulting the person it affected most. Stephanie lingered just long enough to give the room a slow appraising look, as if she were deciding what needed replacing before following him upstairs. Her eyes scanned my furniture, my photos, my life with the clinical efficiency of a real estate agent calculating square footage and resale value. Alicia. My granddaughter offered a small, uncertain smile, the kind you give someone you care about but aren't sure how to approach when your parents are orchestrating something that feels wrong. She was 19, old enough to sense the tension, young enough to feel trapped between loyalty and conscience. Brandon didn't even look up from his phone, his thumbs moving across the screen in that perpetual dance of teenage disconnection. "Nice to see you too," I murmured, but nobody heard me. Upstairs drawers began opening and closing with the familiar rhythm of people unpacking for an extended stay. I took a sip of coffee, letting the bitter warmth ground me in the present moment. In the old days, when my wife Lorraine was alive, this house had never felt invaded. Even surprise visits were warm, welcome things, filled with laughter and the smell of whatever she was cooking. We'd bought this place in the late 80s, a tired 2-story on the edge of Cedar Point Lake, its paint peeling its roof, groaning in storms. It took years of hard work, weekend after weekend, to make it into the home we loved. We'd laughed through those years, fought a little sure, but it was ours. Ours in a way that went beyond the deed and the mortgage payments. Every nail, every brushstroke, every repair carried our hands, our sweat, our dreams. Now I listened to my son move through it like a contractor assessing a property he'd just acquired, and that sense of safety I'd built over 3 decades felt like something from another lifetime. "Terrence," I called, keeping my tone even and measured. "What's going on?" His voice came down from above, carried on that note of patient explanation adults use when they've already decided what's best for you. "We told you, Dad, we're having the house worked on, needed a place to stay for a few weeks." "I don't recall you telling me that." "You must have forgotten," he said, and underneath the casual tone ran a thread of impatience, as if my memory itself was now up for debate. Stephanie appeared at the landing, her expression arranged into something that might pass for concern in better light. "We'll be out of your hair before you know it." "That's fine," I said carefully, "but the upstairs bedroom." "Dad," Terrence cut in, appearing beside his wife. "The stairs aren't good for you. This way you've got the bathroom right there on the main floor. No risk of falling." I met his eyes and saw the rehearsed look like a salesman delivering a well-practiced line he'd perfected in front of a mirror. This wasn't a spontaneous decision made at my front door. This was planned, scripted, executed. "I've managed those stairs for 35 years. I said, my voice low and steady. Stephanie smiled without warmth, that tight expression that passes for politeness when someone has already decided you're an obstacle rather than a person. "And we'd like to keep it that way. Let us help." Some arguments cost more than silence. I'd learned that lesson decades ago, working as a customs inspector, watching travelers decide which battles to fight at the checkpoint and which to let slide. You pick your moments, you choose your terrain, you don't waste ammunition on skirmishes you can win later with strategy instead of confrontation. I turned toward the small room off the living room, the one that had been a guest room for as long as I could remember. A single bed pushed against the wall, a small dresser with drawers that stuck in humid weather, no closet to speak of. More of a storage nook than a bedroom, really. Now it was mine, at least, according to the narrative being written around me without my input. Upstairs, the sound of zippers and suitcase lids punctuated my thoughts like drum beats marking time. By mid-afternoon, their presence was everywhere, colonizing my space with the subtle aggression of people who believe they're doing you a favor. Terrence's duffel bag slouched on the sofa where Lorraine used to fold laundry. Stephanie had draped a scarf over the armchair where my wife used to read mystery novels and drink tea. My coffee table was now host to an arrangement of scented candles that smelled faintly of lavender and chemicals, nothing like the natural smells of wood and lake water that usually filled my home. I caught Stephanie in the kitchen, peering into my refrigerator with the expression of someone conducting an inspection. "This milk expired yesterday," she said, holding it up like evidence in a trial I hadn't known I was standing for. "I drink it with my coffee," I replied, my voice neutral. "Terrence, pick up almond milk later," she called toward the living room, dismissing my preference as if it were a medical condition that needed correction. "I've lived this long without almond milk," I muttered under my breath. "Well, we'll just make a few small changes," she said with that same thin smile, the kind that says the speaker believes they're being reasonable while slowly dismantling your autonomy one decision at a time. I stepped out onto the deck to breathe air that didn't feel like it was being rationed. The lake rippled under a pale autumn sunlight, dancing across the surface in patterns that never repeated. Two geese drifted near the reeds, their necks curved in that graceful question-mark shape that always made Lorraine pause whatever she was doing to watch. Out here, the air was clean, untouched by the sense of rearrangement creeping through my house like kudzu. Helping family wasn't the problem. Lord knows I'd done my share for Terrence over the years. College tuition when scholarships didn't quite cover it, his first down payment when he and Stephanie bought their starter home, even covered his mortgage payments when the market collapsed and his real estate commissions dried up for 6 months. I never kept score, never threw it back in his face during arguments, never treated generosity like a loan with interest. But this was different. This wasn't asking. This was assuming. And assumptions I'd learned long ago are the first stones in a wall built around you, trapping you inside a narrative someone else is writing about your life. When I came back inside, Alicia was in the kitchen alone, pouring herself a glass of water with the careful movements of someone trying not to draw attention. "Hi, Grandpa," she said softly. "Hi, sweetheart. You doing okay?" She shrugged a gesture that contained volumes of things she couldn't say with her parents in the house. "Yeah, college is a lot." "You'll manage," I said, recognizing in her that same quiet strength her grandmother had possessed. "How long are you all staying?" She hesitated, and in that pause I heard everything she was trying not to tell me. "They said a month, but I don't know." "Alicia, come help me." Marissa's voice carried in from the living room, sharp with the authority of someone used to immediate obedience. She gave me an apologetic look that said more than any explanation could, and went to join her mother. I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the small changes already taking root. New dish soap by the sink, a different brand of coffee filters on the counter. My favorite mug pushed to the back of the cabinet behind 4 tall white ones that matched each other and nothing else in my house. That night in the cramped guest room that smelled faintly of storage and disuse, I could hear voices through the floorboards. Not the words, just the low, steady hum of conversation, planning, deciding. People don't bring 6 suitcases for a few weeks, I thought, staring at the ceiling. And they don't claim the master bedroom for safety reasons when the person they're supposedly protecting has been climbing those stairs without incident for 35 years. I reached into my pocket and felt the edge of the envelope I'd noticed earlier mixed in with the mail on the entry table. Forwarding notices from the post office, a glossy postcard for a senior living showcase at a hotel off Route 8, and a coupon for stair lifts all rubber banded together with my name on top in handwriting that wasn't mine. Someone had filled out forms for me and my life had sprouted brochures I hadn't asked for. I lay there in the almost dark, listening to my house settle around strangers who shared my blood but had forgotten to ask my permission. And I began to count the way I used to count shipping containers at the port, methodically cataloging what was mine, what was theirs, and what they thought they could take without me noticing. The game had started. They just didn't know I'd been trained to spot smugglers. The next morning arrived with the sound of furniture being moved. I woke to the scrape of chair legs on hardwood floors and the low murmur of Stephanie's voice issuing instructions to someone who wasn't me. By the time I emerged from the guest room, the living room had been rearranged. The sofa now faced the lake at a different angle, as if someone had decided the view needed improvement after 35 years of being just fine. Stephanie stood in the hallway with a basket of new candles replacing the simple unscented ones Lorraine had preferred with elaborate vanilla and cinnamon things that announced their presence from 3 rooms away. When she noticed me watching, she smiled that smile again, the one that said she was doing me a favor I hadn't asked for. "Just freshening things up a bit," she said brightly. "The house needs some life in it." "The house had plenty of life in it before you arrived," I wanted to say. But I just nodded and moved toward the kitchen where coffee was calling my name like an old friend who still remembered who I was. On the mantel above the fireplace, I noticed immediately what was missing. The framed photo of Lorraine and me on the day we finally fixed the porch railing, both of us sweaty and ridiculous and proud, had been moved. It now sat on the piano bench tucked behind a stack of glossy magazines about home design and expensive furniture. In its place on the mantel was a white ceramic sculpture that looked like someone had started to make a knot and given up halfway through. "Less clutter," Stephanie said when she caught me staring at the empty space where my wife's face used to greet me every morning. "Creates a cleaner aesthetic." Aesthetic. I repeated the word in my mind like it was a foreign language I was being forced to learn. I walked over and moved the photo back to the mantel where the morning light hit Lorraine's smile just right. I didn't make a speech about it. You don't spend 40 years reading people for a living without learning when a speech puts you in a hole deeper than silence. At 10 o'clock, a white van pulled into my driveway. A young man in his 20s stepped out carrying a clipboard and a tape measure, wearing khakis that had been ironed with the kind of precision that said his mother still did his laundry. He knocked like people do when they're expected 3 quick raps that said this wasn't a cold call. I opened the door before he finished the 3rd knock. "Here for the measurements," he said, flipping through papers on his clipboard with the casual efficiency of someone who did this 20 times a week. "Measurements for what?" I asked, my voice level, though I already had a pretty good idea what was happening. He checked his paperwork again. "Kitchen. Mrs. Stephanie Wilson booked a free estimate. Cabinet refacing." I looked past him toward the kitchen that had learned the shape of my hands and Lorraine's over decades. The cabinet doors had nicks and scratches that told stories. The Thanksgiving the turkey pan slipped and nearly hit the floor. The night we hosted Lorraine's sister and discovered you could run out of clean plates if you weren't careful. The time Alicia was 3 and colored on a lower panel with a green crayon, and Lorraine said to leave it because it was better than any paint job we could buy. "Not today," I said quietly but firmly. The young man looked confused, then relieved that he might get back to his truck early, then concerned about his quota. "Can I leave a brochure?" "You can leave," I said in that polite way. People from the Midwest are rude with a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes but keeps the words civil. Terrence appeared from wherever he'd been, moving quickly across the living room. He clapped the contractor on the back with false familiarity. "Sorry, buddy. My dad's old school. We'll call you." The man took this as both instruction and permission to escape, retreating to his van, which had a dangling air freshener shaped like a pine tree that knocked against the windshield in the breeze. When Terrence closed the door, he leaned his forehead against it for a breath like he was carrying the world's most noble headache. Then he turned to face me with that expression I'd seen 1,000 times growing up, the one that said he'd already decided I was being difficult and he was being patient. "Dad," he said, his voice calibrated for maximum reasonableness. "We talked about updating. Small things, smart things. You want this place to last, don't you?" "It has," I said simply, "longer than most marriages." "Very funny," he said, which told me he didn't think it was funny at all. "Stephanie got us a free estimate. Free." "It always starts free," I said. "So does advice." He put his hands in his pockets and looked down at the entryway tile, the pattern Lorraine had insisted on, even though I'd thought it was too modern at the time. She'd been right, of course. She usually was. "You know, Dad," he said, lifting his head with eyes that had gone bright with the sheen some men wear right before a deal goes through, "you're not the only one who loves this house." "I've noticed," I said. He opened his mouth closed. It seemed to select a different answer, the way you'd select a shirt from a closet full of options. "We should make sure it's positioned for—" He stopped himself. "Positioned for what?" I asked. "For you," he said carefully. "For your needs." "I need my bed where my bed has been," I said, my voice still quiet but with a steel edge creeping in. "I need my photo where my photo belongs. I need to drink coffee without being managed like a child who can't be trusted with dairy products." It's just structure, he said, reaching for that word like it was a life preserver. Structure keeps everyone sane. Save it for people who asked for your structure, I said. In the late afternoon, I found Stephanie in the hallway with a roll of blue painter's tape sticking small pieces on the walls next to framed pictures. Family photos, vacation snapshots, the visual history of a life lived in this house. "What are you doing?" I asked, though the answer was unfolding right in front of me. She didn't look up, continuing to mark photos with the systematic approach of someone executing a plan. Marking things to reorganize. We need visual consistency. Visual consistency. I repeated, tasting the corporate speak on my tongue like medicine. "Is that like family?" She pressed a bit of tape next to a photo of Lorraine at the lake in a straw hat, kneeling to show Alicia how to hold a frog without hurting it. One of my favorite pictures, because you could see 3 generations of kindness in a single frame. "We'll keep the nice ones," Stephanie said, as if she were the curator of my memories. "They're all nice," I said. "This one's blurry," she said, tugging at the frame like it was already decided. I held up my hand without thinking, without planning it, just something in my chest, stepping forward before my brain caught up. "Leave them." She looked at me like I'd grabbed her wrist, startled by the sudden boundary. "We're not throwing them away. We're just curating." "Curating is what museums do to other people's lives," I said, my voice low and steady. "These are mine." A shadow cut across the hallway light, and Terrence appeared at the top of the stairs, moving with the practiced urgency of a mediator who'd heard just enough. "Everything okay?" he asked, though the question was really a warning wrapped in civility. "Your father has feelings about the hallway," Stephanie said, her tone shifting into something that invited him to take her side. Terrence's smile was the one he used on clients who were about to walk away from a deal. "Let's table the gallery wall," he said, as if we were in one of his conference rooms and not standing in my hallway discussing whether I had the right to keep my own photographs where I wanted them. He kissed the top of Stephanie's head, and she put the tape in her pocket, taking longer than necessary to show me this wasn't surrender so much as strategic retreat. I ate dinner early that evening just to have something that didn't require negotiation. Scrambled eggs and toast that came out too dark because I forgot to watch it. Lorraine had always popped the slices up at the first click, her timing perfect from decades of practice. I sat alone at the small table in what used to be my kitchen and was rapidly becoming their staging area, and I thought about how quickly a person can become a guest in their own home. After dinner, I stepped out onto the deck where the air still remembered who I was. The lake was turning that particular shade of gray-blue it gets in early evening, peaceful and indifferent to human drama. I stood there with my hands on the railing Lorraine and I had rebuilt together, and I made a decision. They thought this was their house now because I'd been quiet, because I'd moved downstairs without fighting, because I'd let the contractor leave without making a scene. They'd mistaken my silence for surrender, my patience for weakness. But I'd spent 30 years at the customs checkpoint learning to spot contraband hidden in false bottoms and behind legitimate cargo. I knew how to watch, how to wait, how to document everything while looking like I wasn't paying attention at all. Tomorrow I'd start making phone calls, quiet ones, to people who understood that paper and signatures and property rights weren't suggestions, they were law. And the law I was about to remind my son and his wife was the one thing in this situation that was actually on my side. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't called in 3 years, Calvin at the marina. The text I sent was simple: "Need to talk, you still keep office hours." His response came back in under a minute: "For you always, tomorrow morning." I typed back, "See you at 9. Inside the house, I could hear Stephanie laughing at something on television, the sound of someone comfortable in a space they believed they'd already won. I smiled into the darkness, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes but holds all the planning that's about to unfold. Let them rearrange furniture. Let them order contractors and mark photos and replace my milk with their almond alternatives. Every move they made without asking was another piece of evidence I was quietly, methodically collecting. The game had started. They just didn't know yet that I'd been playing it longer than they'd been alive. That evening, we gathered in the living room after dinner, a forced togetherness that felt like a performance none of us had rehearsed properly. Terrence sat in my recliner, the one that had molded itself to my body over 2 decades, scrolling through his phone with the distracted attention of someone waiting for the right moment to say something important. Stephanie emerged from the kitchen with a bottle of wine she'd brought from somewhere, already uncorked, already decided. She poured herself a generous glass and settled onto the sofa with the satisfied air of someone reviewing a property they were about to close on. "You know," Terrence said, looking up from his phone with that casual tone people use when they're about to say something they've been planning all day, "if we moved the sofa to face the lake more directly, it would really open up the space. Good for resale value." The words hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't dissipate. "Resale," I said quietly, my coffee cup suspended halfway to my mouth. Stephanie's head snapped toward Terrence with a look that could cut glass. "Ignore him," she said quickly, forcing a laugh that sounded like breaking pottery. "He's always talking shop. Real estate brain, you know how it is." But I did know how it was. I knew exactly how it was. That single word resale had opened a window I wasn't supposed to see through yet. Terrence wasn't talking about improvements for my benefit. He was talking about staging a property for market. He was talking about preparing my house for sale like I was already gone, already moved, already somewhere else entirely. I set my cup down carefully, stood without saying another word, and walked out onto the deck. Behind me, I heard Terrence's voice rise, slightly frustrated. "What I was just saying." And then Stephanie's sharp whisper cutting him off with words I couldn't quite make out but understood perfectly. That was the sound of someone being told they'd revealed too much too soon. The evening air was cooler now, carrying that edge of autumn that said winter was already practicing its lines off stage. I gripped the deck railing and stared out at the lake, watching the last light fade from the water, turning everything to shadow and suggestion. I'd been a fool, not for missing the signs because I'd seen them all, but for hoping somewhere in the back of my mind that I was wrong, that my son wouldn't actually do this. That the boy I'd raised, the one I'd taught to fish off this very dock, to change a tire, to shake hands firmly and look people in the eye, wouldn't plan to take my home out from under me like I was a problem that needed solving rather than a person who deserved respect. The screen door creaked behind me with that particular sound it makes, the one I'd been meaning to oil for 3 years and never got around to, because Lorraine used to say it was like a doorbell that warned you when someone was coming. "Grandpa." I turned to find Alicia standing in the doorway, backlit by the living room lamp, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. She looked uncertain, caught between the world of her parents inside and the world of her grandfather outside, trying to figure out which one told the truth. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Always," I said, gesturing to the chair beside me. She came and sat, but not like someone relaxing. She sat like someone preparing to confess something that had been eating at her, perched on the edge of the seat, ready to flee if necessary. "I need to tell you something," she said, staring at her hands. "I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. But I heard them talking last night after you went to bed." I waited, giving her the space to find her words. One thing working customs taught me was that people tell you more when you let silence do the asking. "Mom was excited." Alicia continued, speaking faster now that she'd started, like she needed to get it all out before she lost her nerve. "She talks faster when she's excited. She said they'd put down a deposit. For a place." "What kind of place?" I asked, though cold certainty was already settling in my chest like ice. "A senior community," she said, wincing at the words. "That's what they called it. But then Mom said the real term, the one on the contract, was assisted living. She said it would solve everything." Alicia made little air quotes around "solve everything" with her fingers, and the gesture would have been funny if my entire world wasn't tilting sideways. "They were talking like it was already decided," she went on. "Like you'd already agreed. But Grandpa, you didn't agree, did you?" "No," I said, my voice steady, despite the fury building behind my ribs. "I did not agree." She let out a breath she'd been holding. "I asked Dad about it this morning in the car. I kept it casual. I said, 'Are we moving? Grandpa seems fine.' And he said it was for your safety, that you need routine and supervision, that they can't be here forever." She paused, swallowing hard before continuing. "And then he said, 'Besides, we'll need the rooms when Nana and Papa Wilson move in.'" There it was. The full picture painted in brushstrokes I should have seen coming from the moment those 6 suitcases hit my living room floor. This wasn't about a few weeks while their house was being worked on. This wasn't about helping me with the stairs or keeping me safe from imaginary hazards. This was about moving me out and moving Stephanie's parents in. About claiming my house, my home, the place Lorraine and I had built together nail by nail and memory by memory, and turning it into something else entirely. something that had nothing to do with me except as an inconvenient obstacle that needed removing. "They're selling their condo in Fairview," Alicia added quietly. "Mom wants them here by Thanksgiving. She said the timing would be perfect." Perfect. The word sat in my mouth like poison. "Grandpa, I told Dad it wasn't fair," Alicia said, her voice cracking slightly. "That you're you. That you know how to take care of yourself. He said I didn't understand adult decisions yet." She rolled her eyes, and the gesture was so much like her grandmother that my chest ached. "And then he said not to tell you because you'd get anxious and spiral." I hate that word, spiral. Like you're not a whole person who deserves to know what people are planning to do with your life. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "That took courage." "I'm scared I made it worse," she said. "You didn't," I assured her. "You gave me something I need, information, the truth. Can't fight what you can't see." "How much do you know?" I asked. "Besides the deposit." She took a breath, organizing her thoughts. "They toured a bunch of places last week, like 5 or 6 different facilities. They settled on one called Oakwood Senior Living. It's in Maple Hollow near the highway. Mom likes it because it's clean and close to good hospitals. Dad likes it because they have a shuttle and social programming so he doesn't feel guilty about not visiting." She said the last part quickly, ashamed for him. "Mom already made an appointment with a clinic," Alicia continued. "For you, Tuesday at 10:15. She put it on a calendar she made for you, like that makes it official. The clinic specializes in elder care pathways." Again with the air quotes this time around, elder care pathways, and I could hear the contempt in her voice for the bureaucratic language that tried to make kidnapping sound like compassion. "I looked it up between classes," she said. "The place, Oakwood. People leave reviews online. Some are good, some not. People said the staff turnover is high, that if you don't have someone checking on you regularly, you can kind of get lost in the system." Each word she spoke was another nail, another board, another wall of the trap closing in around me. But instead of panic, I felt something else settling into place. Clarity. The cold, calculating clarity I used to feel at the checkpoint when I'd spot something wrong in a shipping manifest, some detail that didn't add up, and I'd know without seeing inside the container that something illegal was being smuggled. They'd made a mistake. They'd moved too fast, planned too much, gotten too confident. And in their confidence, they'd left evidence everywhere. The forwarding notice, the appointment I never scheduled, the calendar I never asked for, the deposit in Terrence's name. All of it documented, traceable, provable. "Grandpa?" Alicia's voice pulled me back. "Are you okay?" I looked at her, this young woman who'd chosen conscience over comfort, truth over family loyalty, and I felt a surge of pride that pushed back against the betrayal churning in my gut. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm informed. An information sweetheart is the most powerful weapon there is." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "What I've been trained to do," I said. "Watch, document, wait for the right moment, and then move pieces into place they won't see coming until it's too late to stop." She nodded, and in her eyes I saw belief. She thought I could fix this. And standing there in the cold with the lake whispering behind us, and my house full of people who'd forgotten I was still the one whose name was on the deed, I realized she was right. I could fix this. I would fix this. But not with anger or confrontation or loud declarations that would give them time to adjust their strategy. No, I'd do it the way I'd always done things that mattered. Quietly, methodically, with paper and signatures and the law on my side. "Alicia," I said, "if you hear anything else, any dates or times or names, you tell me. Don't trust your memory, write it down. And don't put it in your phone. Paper can't be subpoenaed from a cloud." She almost smiled. "You really were a customs inspector. Once you learn to count boxes and check manifests," I said, "you never stop seeing the world as cargo that needs inspecting." We went back inside together. Terrence and Stephanie were in the kitchen, their voices low and urgent, the conversation of people who knew they'd made an error and were trying to figure out how much damage it had done. When they saw us come in, they went silent, rearranging their faces into expressions of casual normalcy. "Everything okay out there?" Stephanie asked, her tone too bright, too interested. "Fine," I said. "Just looking at the stars with my granddaughter, teaching her the constellations." It was a lie, but it was the kind of lie that wouldn't raise suspicion. Wholesome, grandfatherly, exactly what they expected from the old man they were planning to warehouse in a facility with a shuttle and social programming. I excused myself to the guest room and closed the door. Then I pulled out my phone and started making a list in the Notes app, something I could delete later but needed to see written out now to make it real. Call Calvin tomorrow. Verify deed status. Contact title office. Check bank account beneficiaries. Find property attorney. Get medical evaluation scheduled on my terms, not theirs. Document everything they do without permission. Photograph the forwarding notice. Save the calendar they made. Record dates and times. I stared at the list, then added one more line at the bottom. Find out who owns the house they're planning to put me in. Because if there's one thing I learned in 30 years of catching smugglers, it's that following the money always tells you who's really in charge. I deleted the list, memorized it, and lay back on the narrow bed that wasn't mine. Above me, I could hear footsteps. Stephanie's quick, efficient pace. Terrence's heavier tread. The sound of people settling into a home they'd decided was theirs. Let them settle. Let them plan. Let them make appointments and tour facilities and discuss resale value over wine they brought to my house. Because tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I was going to start building a case they wouldn't see coming, and by the time they realized what I was doing, it would be too late for them to stop it. The old customs inspector wasn't retired. He was just waiting for the right shipment to inspect. And it had just arrived at his door. The next morning, I woke before dawn, that automatic early rising that comes from decades of starting work shifts at 5 a.m. The house was still quiet, everyone else asleep in beds they'd claimed without asking. I moved through the darkness like a man who knew every creak in the floorboards, every place to step to avoid announcing himself. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, each step deliberate and silent. At the top, I paused outside what used to be my bedroom. Through the door, I could hear Terrence's heavy breathing, the kind of deep sleep that comes from believing everything is going according to plan. Stephanie made small sounds in her sleep, restless even in unconsciousness. I moved past their door to the spare room where we'd kept overflow storage, the place where Lorraine had tucked away the things that mattered most. I opened the closet as quietly as humanly possible and reached for the second drawer of the built-in dresser, the one that stuck slightly in humid weather. Inside, beneath stacks of old greeting cards and a shoebox of vacation photos, sat a flat manila envelope with a crease across the middle. I pulled it out carefully, feeling the weight of what was inside. These were the documents I'd been smart enough to keep organized when Lorraine got sick, when lawyers and doctors and insurance companies had all wanted their piece of paperwork signed and filed and notarized. I carried the envelope downstairs and spread its contents on the kitchen table under the dim light of the stove hood. The deed to the house recorded at the county office in 1988, when we'd finally paid off the mortgage after 15 years of scrimping and saving. Owner James Washington. No lien, no life estate, no co-owners, just my name clean and clear, stamped and official. The will I'd updated after Lorraine passed, leaving everything to Terrence because he was my only child, and that's what you do. The life insurance policy that had paid out smaller than anyone promised, but enough to cover funeral costs and 6 months of breathing room. And the marriage certificate, the only paper I owned that could still make me hear Lorraine's laugh just by reading our names side by side. I pulled out my phone and photographed each document, making sure the text was clear and legible. Then I emailed them to myself at an address I kept for important things, the one that wasn't connected to any app that Stephanie might convince me to share access to for family calendar coordination or photo sharing or whatever excuse she'd invent. The deed was the important one. That single piece of paper proved beyond any argument that this house was mine. Not ours. Not the family's. Mine. And whatever plans Terrence and Stephanie had made, they'd made them without the one signature that actually mattered under law. I heard a sound upstairs, the creak of someone getting up to use the bathroom. I quickly gathered the documents back into the envelope and moved to the living room. The Christmas decorations were stored in a large plastic bin in the coat closet shoved to the back behind winter jackets and boots. I opened the bin, moved aside the garland and ornaments Lorraine had collected over 40 years, and found the false bottom I'd installed myself to store the few valuable things we owned. My grandfather's war medals, Lorraine's grandmother's jewelry, and now one copy of my critical documents. The second copy went into the kitchen, tucked inside a spiral-bound community cookbook from 1986 that Lorraine had loved, the kind with recipes submitted by church members and local businesses. If anyone went rifling through my things, they wouldn't waste time reading recipes for casseroles and Jell-O salads. Sometimes the best hiding place is something so boring no one bothers to look. By the time Stephanie came downstairs at 7:30, I was sitting at the table with fresh coffee and the newspaper, looking like a man who'd done nothing more suspicious than wake early out of habit. "Morning, James," she said, her voice carrying that forced brightness people use when they're trying to establish normalcy after tension. She moved to the cabinet and I watched her rearrange my pills, lining them up by size instead of by the schedule I'd been following for 10 years. "I organized these for you," she said, not asking if I wanted them organized, just announcing it as an accomplished fact. "Much easier to keep track this way." "I've been keeping track just fine," I said mildly. "I'm sure you have," she said in that tone that meant she was sure I hadn't. Terrence came down 20 minutes later, already on his phone, talking to someone about a property showing and a client who wanted to see 3 houses in 2 hours. Real estate never sleeps, apparently. He poured coffee without looking up from his screen, grunted something that might have been good morning, and disappeared into what used to be my home office to take a call. At 10:30, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. I watched through the window as a man in his 40s stepped out carrying a leather portfolio and wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He had that polished look of someone who makes a living convincing people to sign things. Stephanie materialized beside me. "That's Evan Marshall," she said. "Terrence asked him to stop by with some paperwork, just standard stuff to make things easier." "Easier for who?" I asked, but she was already moving to open the door before he could knock. Evan Marshall shook my hand with practiced firmness, the kind of handshake they teach in law school or sales seminars designed to convey trustworthiness and authority in equal measure. "Mr. Washington, pleasure to meet you. I'm with Harrison and Marshall. Terrence asked me to bring by some documents that will help streamline things as you transition." Transition. There was that word again, dressed up to sound helpful, when what it really meant was removal. He opened his portfolio on the dining room table, laying out forms with the careful precision of a dealer arranging cards. "A general durable power of attorney," he said, tapping the first document, "healthcare proxy, and a simple affidavit allowing your son to act on your behalf for routine housing and financial decisions." "Routine," I said, as if the word were something I could examine from all angles. Terrence appeared from the office, timing so perfect it had clearly been coordinated. "It's standard, Dad. Everybody does it. Just make sure we can handle things if you're busy or if there's an emergency." "Busy at what?" I asked. "Emergency like what?" Evan jumped in smoothly. "It's really quite simple, Mr. Washington. It just authorizes your son to manage paperwork, coordinate with medical professionals, handle banking if needed. All things I'm sure he'd help with anyway, but this makes it legal and clean." Legal and clean. The words made my skin crawl because I knew exactly what they meant. They meant Terrence could move money, sign contracts, make medical decisions, put me in Oakwood or any other facility he chose. All with my supposed permission granted through a signature they were hoping to get while I was still off balance from being displaced in my own home. "I'll have my banker review it," I said, not touching the papers. Terrence's face tightened. "Dad, we're trying to make this easy." "Then you should have asked before you showed up with a lawyer and pre-printed forms," I said, my voice still calm but with an edge creeping in like frost. Evan, to his credit, read the room correctly. "Of course, take your time. These are important decisions. Here's my card. Call the office when you're ready, and we can set up a proper consultation." After he left, Terrence stood in the doorway with his hands on his hips, looking at me like I was a contract that wouldn't close. "What's the problem? We're trying to help you." "The problem," I said carefully, "is that help means doing things with someone, not to someone. You want to help, ask what I need. Don't tell me what you've decided I need." "You're being difficult," Stephanie said from the kitchen. "I'm being awake," I corrected, after they left for some appointment they'd scheduled without telling me about. I picked up my phone and called the number I'd found online the night before. Dr. Maria Santos, the doctor Stephanie had booked me with for Tuesday. The receptionist answered on the second ring. "This is James Washington," I said. "I need to reschedule an appointment that was made for me without my knowledge." There was a pause while she pulled up the file. "Tuesday at 10:15. "That's the one. I'll schedule my own appointments from now on. Can we move it to next Monday at 9, and please note in my file that I'm the only one authorized to make or change appointments. No one else." "Of course, Mr. Washington," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, the sound of someone who'd seen this kind of family dynamic before. "I've made that note. If anyone calls asking to change your appointments or requesting information, we'll refer them directly to you." "Thank you," I said. And one more thing. If anyone asks what we discussed, you can tell them the patient is capable of discussing it himself. Noted, she said. I hung up and felt something settle in my chest. Each small action, each document secured, each boundary set was a brick in the wall I was building between their plans and my reality. They thought they were 2 steps ahead. They didn't know I'd been running this race longer than they'd been alive. That afternoon, while they were out, I did one more thing. I went to the hook by the back door where we'd always kept the spare house keys, the set that had been hanging there since before Terrence could drive. I took them down and replaced them with a different set, identical except for a small mark I'd filed into the base years ago when Lorraine kept mixing them up. The original spares went into my pocket, and from there to a place they wouldn't think to look. Not hidden exactly, just relocated to where they belonged, which was with the person who actually owned the property they opened. If Terrence wanted to let himself in, he could use the front door keys that still worked. But the side entrance, the garage, the basement, those were mine again. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. That evening I sat in the guest room and made a list on paper, not in my phone. Paper can't be hacked or accidentally synced to a family cloud account. I wrote down everything I needed to do, everyone I needed to call, every piece of evidence I needed to gather. At the top of the list in capital letters I wrote, "Deed is in my name only." Below that, "Get capacity evaluation on my terms." Document everything they do without permission. Contact property attorney, verify title, check account beneficiaries, and at the bottom circled twice. Find out who really benefits if I go to Oakwood, because in 30 years of inspecting cargo, I'd learned that the person pushing hardest for a particular outcome usually had money riding on it, and I was going to find out exactly whose money was in play here. The game wasn't over, it had barely begun, and they'd just taught me all the rules they thought I didn't know. They called it a family meeting, but meetings imply discussion, and this was an announcement dressed up in civility. We gathered in the living room on Thursday evening, Terrence standing near the fireplace like a man about to deliver a presentation he'd rehearsed, Stephanie sitting on the sofa with a folder in her lap, and that tight smile she wore when things were going according to her plan. "Dad," Terrence began, his voice carrying that forced cheerfulness people use when they're about to tell you something for your own good. "We need to talk about timing." I sat in the armchair they hadn't claimed yet, my hands resting calmly on the armrests, my face giving away nothing. 77 years had taught me that the man who shows his cards first usually loses. Timing for what? I asked, though I already knew. Alicia had warned me this was coming. "For your transition," Stephanie said, opening the folder with practiced efficiency. "Oakwood Senior Living has a wonderful opening. They don't come up often, and we were lucky enough to get you moved to the top of their wait list. They did us a real favor." "How generous of them," I said evenly. "The move-in date is Saturday morning." Terrence continued, watching my face for a reaction. "I know it seems fast, but the staff said transitions actually go smoother when you don't drag out the anxiety. Rip off the Band-Aid, so to speak. Saturday, 2 days from now. They'd scheduled the dismantling of my life with less notice than you'd give for a dentist appointment. Saturday is fast," I said, keeping my voice neutral, giving them nothing to work with. "We've already packed most of your essentials," Stephanie said, pulling papers from the folder. 2 suitcases, 1 garment bag for your nice clothes, toiletries. The suite is fully furnished, so you won't need much. Everything else we've carefully boxed and labeled for storage in the garage." "Storage," I repeated, tasting the word. "In my own garage." "Just temporarily," Terrence said quickly, "until we figure out what you want to keep long-term. This way nothing gets lost or damaged." Stephanie slid a brochure across the coffee table toward me. Glossy and professional, showing happy seniors playing cards and walking through gardens that looked nothing like the real facility probably did. "The orientation is at 10 o'clock Saturday morning. There's a welcome brunch afterward. Very nice, very warm. You'll make friends quickly." "Brunch," I said. "What time did you say?" 10? Stephanie repeated as if the schedule were already set in stone and my attendance were a foregone conclusion. Terrence pulled out another folder, this one thicker. "The suite is on the 2nd floor close to the elevator. It has a window that looks out on the courtyard. Very peaceful. The staff-to-resident ratio exceeds state guidelines." "On weekends too?" I asked. "Exceeds across the board," Stephanie said, missing or ignoring my sarcasm. I looked at the papers they'd laid out like evidence in a trial where I was both defendant and jury. Floor plans, activity schedules, meal times, Rules about visitors and noise and what you could and couldn't keep in your room. My life reduced to bullet points and facility guidelines. "Can I see the inventory?" I asked. "The list of what you've packed for me." Stephanie brightened, pleased that I was engaging with her process. She handed me several typed pages, everything itemized with the kind of detail that would make a customs inspector proud. Clothing by category, toiletries by type, personal items limited to what would fit on a single shelf. I read through it slowly, noting what they'd decided I needed and what they'd decided I didn't. Then I stood up and walked to the desk where Lorraine used to pay bills and write letters. I found a pen and a legal pad and came back. "I need you both to sign something," I said. Terrence frowned. "Sign what?" "An acknowledgement that this inventory is accurate." I said, writing at the top of the page, "Property of James Washington removed from residence and placed in storage. If you're taking my things and storing them, I want a record that we all agree on what was taken and where it went." "Dad, this isn't necessary," Terrence said, but his voice had gone uncertain. "It's very necessary," I said calmly. 30 years inspecting cargo taught me that documentation prevents disputes later. You want to help me sign the paper saying you helped me exactly this way." I watched Stephanie's face tighten. She knew what I was doing. I was creating a legal trail proof that they'd removed my possessions from my home without my full consent, just my forced compliance. But she also knew that refusing to sign would look worse than signing would make their helpful concern look like something else entirely. "Fine," she said, taking the pen. "We're not hiding anything." She signed with those large, looping letters that took up more space than necessary. Terrence signed below her, his signature cramped and quick, the writing of someone who wanted this moment over. I made a copy on my phone before they could change their minds, then tore off the page and handed it to them. "You keep that. I'll keep my copy." "What copy?" Stephanie asked. "The photograph I just took," I said, holding up my phone. "Also sending it to myself via email, just to be safe." The room went quiet except for the sound of my phone sending the email. Terrence and Stephanie exchanged a look that said they were recalculating something, adjusting their strategy in real time. "Is there anything else?" I asked, my tone still perfectly reasonable, perfectly cooperative. "No," Terrence said slowly. "I think that covers it. We'll leave at 8:30 Saturday morning. I'll drive you. Stephanie will follow with the second load." "Sounds like a plan," I said, and I meant it, though not the plan they thought I was agreeing to. After they went upstairs, I sat alone in the guest room and pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in 3 years. Calvin Reed, who ran the marina and kept a boat slip I'd been renting since Lorraine got sick, and we'd had to sell our little fishing boat to pay medical bills. I typed, "Calvin, need to renew the slip. Deadline coming up. Can we talk tomorrow morning?" His response came back almost immediately. "Thought you'd forgotten about it. 9 a.m. Work for you," I typed back. "Perfect. See you then." I put the phone away and pulled out the envelope that had arrived in yesterday's mail, the one I'd intercepted before Stephanie could see it. Official letterhead from Oakwood Senior Living addressed to Terrence Washington at this address. I opened it carefully, preserving the envelope. Inside was a receipt. Deposit received $1,500. Account holder Terrence Washington. Co-signer Stephanie Wilson. Notes section, reservation for James Washington. Suite 2B, move-in date November 18th. They'd put the deposit in their names. They'd made the reservation. They'd scheduled my entire future without my signature appearing anywhere on any document, which meant legally they were the customers and I was just the product being delivered. I photographed the receipt front and back and added it to the growing file on my phone labeled simply Documents. Then I put the original in with my deed and my capacity evaluation, the arsenal of paper that was going to save me. There was a soft knock on my door. "Come in," I called. Alicia slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. "Grandpa, are you really going to go along with this?" "I'm going to do exactly what they expect me to do," I said, "which is get in the car Saturday morning and let them drive me to Oakwood." Her face fell. "But..." "And while I'm there," I continued, "I'm going to have a very interesting conversation with an old friend who happens to be a resident. Frank Morrison. We worked together at Customs for 15 years. He's been there 8 months, knows how the place works, knows the staff. And he's going to help me figure out exactly how to handle this situation in a way your parents won't see coming." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You're not giving up." I'm not even close to giving up, I said. I'm doing reconnaissance. Can't fight an enemy if you don't know the terrain. What can I do? She asked. Keep your eyes open, I said. Keep your ears open. If they say anything about Oakwood, about the house, about what they're planning after I'm gone, you tell me. Not by text, not by phone call. In person where nobody can record it or screenshot it. She nodded, serious and determined. I can do that. And Alicia, I added, if things start moving fast this weekend, if they try to rush paperwork or get me to sign things, you remember something for me. Remember that I'm doing this on purpose. It might look like I'm cooperating, but I'm really just buying time. Time for what? She asked. Time to move my own pieces into place, I said. Your daddy taught me chess when he was 10 years old. Smart kid, good at strategy. But he forgot one thing his old man taught him. What's that? Never assume your opponent doesn't know the game better than you do. She smiled, despite the worry in her eyes, then slipped back out of the room as quietly as she'd entered. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed and looked around the space that had been mine for 2 weeks and would be mine for 2 more days. Then I'd be in a facility with staff and regulations and people who thought they knew what was best for residents who couldn't advocate for themselves. But I could advocate just fine. I'd spent 3 decades advocating for federal law at an international checkpoint. I knew how to read regulations, how to find loopholes, how to document violations, how to build a case that would hold up under scrutiny. Terrence and Stephanie thought they were putting me somewhere safe, somewhere controlled, somewhere they could visit with clear consciences and tell themselves they'd done the right thing. What they didn't know was that they'd just given me access to resources they didn't know existed. Frank Morrison wasn't just an old colleague. He was a man who'd spent his career finding what people tried to hide. And if there was dirt to be found on what my son and daughter-in-law were really planning, Frank would help me dig it up. Saturday morning was going to be very interesting indeed. They thought they were moving me into Oakwood. What they were really doing was moving me into position. The customs inspector was about to become the investigator, and the investigation was going to start with a simple question. Who really benefits when an old man signs away his house? I was going to find out. And then I was going to do something about it. Saturday morning arrived with a sky the color of old dishwater gray and uncertain. I was already dressed and sitting in the guest room when Terrence knocked at 7:30 earlier than the 8:30 departure time he'd announced. Eager to get this done, apparently. Eager to check the box marked "Father Relocated" so he could move on to whatever came next. "Ready, Dad," he called through the door, his voice carrying that false brightness people use when they're nervous about how something will go. "Ready as I'll ever be," I said, opening the door to find him standing there with my 2 packed suitcases already moved from where I'd left them, taking charge even of the timing of my departure. The drive to Oakwood Senior Living took 20 minutes through streets I'd known for 40 years, past the elementary school where Terrence had learned to read, past the grocery store where Lorraine used to shop every Thursday afternoon, past the park where we'd had family picnics back when family meant something different than it did now. Stephanie followed in her car loaded with boxes containing my life, reduced to inventory items. Alicia and Brandon rode with her conscripted into this relocation effort whether they wanted to be or not. The facility sat back from the road behind a circular drive designed to look welcoming and instead looked institutional. 3 stories of beige brick and white trim, large windows that reflected the cloudy sky, and a covered entrance where someone in scrubs was helping an elderly woman out of a wheelchair van. "Here we are," Terrence said with manufactured enthusiasm. "Nice place, right?" "It's a place," I said neutrally. Inside the lobby did everything it could to not look like what it was. Floral arrangements on side tables, comfortable chairs arranged in conversational groupings that nobody was using, a piano in the corner that probably got played once a month during activities hour. And that smell, the one all these places have a mixture of industrial cleaner and cafeteria food and something else underneath that you don't want to think about too hard. A woman in professional attire approached us with a clipboard and a smile that had been practiced in a mirror. "Mr. Washington, I'm Karen, the admissions coordinator. Welcome to Oakwood. We're so happy to have you joining our community." Community. As if being assigned to live somewhere made you part of something voluntary and warm. "Thank you," I said, shaking her hand with the firmness that says I'm still here, still present, still a person who deserves eye contact. "Let's get you checked in and then Dana will do your initial assessment. Just standard questions, nothing to worry about." Then we'll show you to your suite and you can get settled before the welcome brunch at 10. Terrence hovered at my elbow like he was afraid I might bolt. Stephanie came in with Alicia and Brandon trailing behind all of them, carrying pieces of my dismantled life in their arms. A younger woman in navy scrubs appeared from a side hallway holding a tablet and wearing a name badge that said Dana RN. She had kind eyes, the sort that had seen plenty of families in various stages of this same dynamic and had learned not to judge too quickly. Mr. Washington, I'm Dana. I'll be doing your wellness assessment. It's just a conversation, really, some questions about how you're feeling, how you're managing daily activities. Standard stuff we do with all new residents. Privately, if that's okay, she added, glancing at the cluster of family members. Stephanie stepped forward. I should probably stay in case he doesn't remember something or gets confused. Dana's smile stayed in place, but her voice took on a professional firmness. Actually, we find that people answer more openly when they don't feel observed. It's facility policy for initial assessments. You're welcome to wait right here in the lobby. I caught Alicia's eye and saw relief there. She knew what I knew. This was my first chance to tell someone official that I wasn't here entirely of my own free will. Dana led me to a small office off the main hallway, comfortable but clinical, with a desk and 2 chairs and a poster about fall prevention on the wall. She closed the door and sat down across from me, tablet ready, but her attention fully present. Okay, Mr. Washington, I'm going to ask you some questions. There are no wrong answers. I just need to get a sense of where you are cognitively and physically. First, can you tell me today's date? Saturday, November 18th, 2023, I said clearly. Who's the current president? I told her. Can you draw me a clock showing 10 past 11? She handed me paper and a pen. I drew a circle, marked the numbers, drew the hands pointing to the correct positions. Not perfect, but accurate. Excellent, she said, making notes. Do you take any medications? I listed them, gave her the dosages from memory, explained what each one was for. Do you prepare your own meals? I did until 2 weeks ago when my family moved into my house, I said, deciding to be direct. Her pen paused. Tell me about that. My son and his wife arrived with 6 suitcases and announced they were staying because their house needed work. They moved me out of my bedroom into a guest room. They've been making changes to my home without asking permission, and now they've moved me here to this facility also without really asking. Dana set down her tablet. Mr. Washington, I need to ask you something important. Is anyone pressuring you to move to this facility? People have ideas about what's best for me, I said carefully, but ideas aren't orders. I'm here because my son made a reservation and paid a deposit and drove me here this morning. I'm cooperating because I'm 77 and I know how to pick my battles. But no, this wasn't my choice. She nodded slowly. Are you capable of making your own decisions about where you live? I believe I am, I said. I managed that house for 35 years. I managed a career as a customs inspector for 3 decades. I can still cook clean, handle my medications, drive a car, and remember what day it is. What I can't do is stop my son from making decisions about my life without consulting me. Dana made several notes, her expression thoughtful. Mr. Washington, based on this assessment, you are oriented to time, place, and person. You demonstrate clear understanding of your situation. Your memory and judgment appear intact. I'm going to note in your file that you are independent in activities of daily living and show no signs of cognitive impairment that would prevent you from making your own decisions about housing. Thank you, I said quietly. That doesn't mean we can't provide services if you want them, she continued. But it does mean that you're here as a voluntary resident, not as someone who requires supervised care. Do you understand the difference? I do, I said, and I appreciate you making that distinction. She walked me back to the lobby where my family was waiting with expressions that ranged from anxious to impatient. Everything went very well, Dana told them. Mr. Washington is oriented and independent. I'll send my notes to his primary care physician and to administration. Stephanie's smile looked strained. That's wonderful. Now let's get you settled in your suite. After the tour of a suite that looked like a hotel room pretending to be a home, after the unpacking of my 2 suitcases into spaces designed for temporary residents rather than people with histories, after the welcome brunch with weak coffee and small talk with strangers who'd all arrived here through their own versions of family pressure or declining health, I finally got a moment alone. I stepped outside into the courtyard, a landscaped space with benches and a small fountain and trees that had been chosen for their inability to drop messy leaves. The November air was cold enough to keep most residents inside, which was exactly what I wanted. You're early for a man who supposedly needs assisted living. I turned to find a tall, lean black man in his early 70s standing near the fountain wearing a cardigan and a grin I'd recognize anywhere. Frank Morrison, my partner from the customs office for 15 years before he retired and disappeared into what he'd called the good life. "Frank," I said, genuine warmth flooding through me. "Alicia said you were here, but I wasn't sure I'd believe it until I saw you." "Been here 8 months, he said, coming closer. "Daughter decided I was too much trouble after I fell down some stairs. Broke my hip, spent 3 months in rehab, and somehow that turned permanent. Son decided my stairs were dangerous even though I've been climbing them for 35 years, I said. Moved into my house 2 weeks ago and just relocated me this morning." Frank's expression shifted from amusement to understanding. "Let me guess. They've already got plans for that house that don't include you." "His wife's parents are selling their condo," I confirmed. "Need somewhere to go by Thanksgiving." "So they needed you out of the way," Frank said, nodding. "Classic. You sign anything, power of attorney, healthcare proxy." "Refused to," I said. "They brought a lawyer with papers. I told them I'd have my banker review it first." Frank laughed, the sound carrying genuine respect. "Still got your head on straight. Good. You still got the deed in your name." "Yes, no liens, no co-owners, just me." Frank's grin widened. "Then sell it." "What?" "Sell it," he repeated louder this time. "Out from under their noses. They want you out of the way so they can take your house. Take the house away first. Sell it to someone who'll pay cash and close fast. Use the money to get yourself a place on your terms, not theirs." I stared at him. The idea landing like a punch that knocks the wind out of you in the best possible way. "I can't just sell my house while living in an assisted living facility." "Why not?" Frank asked. "You're the legal owner. You're cognitively sound." "Dana just proved that. You're not under guardianship. There's no law that says being in a facility means you can't make decisions about your property." "They'd fight it," I said. "Let them try," Frank said. "But here's the thing, James. They fight after the fact, after you've already sold it, after the new owner has the deed recorded at the county office. At that point, they're not fighting to stop a sale, they're fighting to reverse a completed legal transaction, and that's a lot harder." I felt something shift in my chest, a possibility opening up that I hadn't let myself consider. "You know someone who could handle this quietly." "I know exactly someone," Frank said, pulling out his phone. "My nephew Owen. Real estate broker, specializes in unique situations. Pocket listings, off-market deals, clients who want discretion. He's helped people in worse situations than yours." He pulled up a contact and showed me the screen. "Owen Morrison, Morrison Realty Group." "Owen works fast," Frank continued. "He can list your place privately, no MLS, no sign in the yard. Show it during the day when your son's at work. Find buyers who pay cash and can close in 30 days. And here's the beautiful part. You can write into the contract that the buyer has to build you a guest cottage on the property, a life lease. You sell them the house, but you get to stay on the land in your own place, built to your specifications, paid for by the buyer." "Who would agree to that?" I asked. "You'd be surprised," Frank said. "Wealthy people looking for waterfront property, people who want a good story to tell at dinner parties about how they helped an old man keep his dignity. Owen knows them. He'll find you someone." My mind was racing, running through the logistics, the legalities, the pure audacity of it. Sell my house while my son thought he was warehousing me safely out of the way. Use the proceeds to force the buyer to build me a cottage where I could live independently on land that was mine for 40 years. Turn their plan to displace me into my plan to reclaim my life on my own terms. "You think this could work?" I asked. "I think you've got nothing to lose by trying," Frank said. "Worst case, you can't find a buyer fast enough and you're exactly where you are now. Best case, you sell that house before Thanksgiving and your son shows up for turkey dinner to discover he's no longer living in a house you own." I thought about Terrence's face when he'd said resale value. I thought about Stephanie marking my photos with painter's tape. I thought about them making medical appointments for me without asking, packing my belongings without permission, signing deposit checks with their names instead of mine. "Introduce me to Owen," I said. Frank's smile was the one I remembered from 1,000 shift changes at the customs office. The look of a man who'd just spotted contraband and was about to make someone's very bad day. He called his nephew right there, put it on speaker. "Owen, it's Uncle Frank. I've got a situation for you. Lakefront property owner wants to sell fast and quiet. Unusual terms, but legal. You free today?" "For you?" Owen's voice came through clear and confident. Always. Where and when? Oakwood Courtyard. 1 hour. Bring your paperwork. When Frank hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 weeks. Not hope exactly, but something better. Agency. The sense that I was moving pieces on the board instead of being a piece that got moved. "Frank," I said, "why are you helping me?" "We haven't talked in 3 years. He looked at me with those eyes that had seen every kind of smuggling operation humans could devise and never stopped being surprised by the depths people would sink to. "Because 30 years ago you caught a shipment I missed. Illegal ivory hidden in a furniture container. You could have taken credit, could have made yourself look good at my expense. Instead, you listed both our names on the report, said we were partners, we share the wins." I remembered that day, though I hadn't thought about it in decades. "I never forgot that," Frank said. "So when I see a partner getting smuggled out of his own life, I help him catch the smugglers. That's what partners do." Exactly 1 hour later, a man in his mid-30s walked into the courtyard wearing jeans and a blazer, carrying a leather messenger bag. He had Frank's eyes and a handshake that meant business. "Owen Morrison," he said, "my uncle tells me you've got a house that needs selling and a family that needs surprising. Tell me everything." And standing in that courtyard while my family thought I was settling into my new life of supervised safety, I told him everything. The deed in my name only. The forced relocation. The plans they thought I didn't know about. The desire not just to sell but to stay, to build a cottage to reclaim my autonomy, 1 square foot at a time. Owen listened, made notes, asked sharp questions, and when I finished he looked at me with professional respect. "Mr. Washington, I can do this, but you need to understand something. Once we start, we move fast. I'll list it. Monday, show it Tuesday and Wednesday, have offers by Thursday, and we'll close in 30 days if I can find the right buyer. No going back once we start. You good with that?" I thought about the guest room that wasn't mine, the bedroom I'd been ejected from, the photos Stephanie wanted to curate, the appointment at a clinic I hadn't scheduled, the brochures I hadn't requested, the deposit check with names that weren't mine. "I'm good with that," I said. "Then let's get to work," Owen said, pulling out a contract. "First thing we need is a listing agreement. You're going to give me exclusive right to sell. Pocket listing only, no public marketing. Terms will include buyer-funded construction of an accessory dwelling unit with life lease to you. Strange request, but I've done stranger." I signed the agreement right there on a bench in the courtyard using Owen's back as a desk, witnessed by Frank, who grinned like he'd just intercepted a shipment headed for people who deserved everything that was coming to them. The game had changed. I wasn't the cargo anymore. I was the shipper. And I was about to deliver a surprise that would teach my son a lesson I should have taught him years ago. You don't ever assume the old man doesn't know what he's doing. Monday morning, Owen called my cell phone at 8:30. "Community integration time," he said cheerfully. "I'm picking you up in 15 minutes. Karen knows you're going out. I told her I'm your nephew, taking you to see the local farmer's market." "There's a farmer's market in November?" I asked. "There could be," Owen said. "That's the beauty of a good story. It just has to be plausible." He arrived in an unmarked silver sedan, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. I met him at the side entrance where Karen waved us off with a clipboard smile and a reminder to be back by lunch. "First showing is at 10, Owen said as we pulled onto the highway. "Henry Novak, 62 from Chicago, made his money in commercial plumbing supply, sold the business last year looking for a place on the water where he can fish and avoid Illinois taxes. He's seen the photos, loves the location, ready to move fast if the property checks out." "And the cottage requirement?" I asked. "He's fine with it, says it gives the place character." His exact words were, "I like buying properties with stories." We took the back way to my house, the route that avoided the main streets where neighbors might see, and mentioned to Terrence that I'd been home. Owen had scheduled the showing for 10 because Terrence had a weekly team meeting every Monday at 9:30 that always ran long, and Stephanie had mentioned on social media that she was doing a yoga class across town at 10. The house looked the same but felt different as we pulled up, like seeing a place you used to live after someone else moved in, familiar and foreign at once. Owen parked around the side where the car wouldn't be visible from the street. At precisely 10 o'clock, a black Mercedes pulled into the driveway. A white man in his early 60s stepped out, silver hair, casual but expensive clothes, the look of someone who'd worked hard and was ready to enjoy the results. "Henry Novak," he said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. Beautiful spot. You've got good bones here. Thank you, I said, unlocking the door with keys I'd kept, despite Terrence thinking he'd collected them all. Henry walked through like a man who'd evaluated 1,000 properties, seeing past the furniture to the structure underneath. In the living room, he paused at the windows. View's good, really good, worth the price right there. In the kitchen, he opened cabinets, checked under the sink, ran the faucet. Kitchen needs work. I'd tear this out, put in something modern. Not a problem. The dining room could be a bar area, he said, more to himself than to us. Open it up to the living room. Put in some built-in shelving. Yeah, I can see it. But it was on the deck where something shifted. He stepped outside and went silent, staring at the water. A full minute passed, then another. Owen and I exchanged glances but didn't interrupt. Finally, Henry turned around. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. The cottage, Owen said. Life lease, detached accessory dwelling unit, 90 days interim housing while it's being built, buyer funded. Henry nodded slowly. I've done stranger deals. Had a property up in Door County with a caretaker who lived above the boathouse. Stayed there 15 years after I bought the place. Made sure everything ran right. This isn't different, just more official. He looked at me directly. You fish. I can hold a pole without turning it into a metaphor, I said. Henry laughed, genuine and surprised. Good. I hate people who make fishing complicated. It's sitting in a boat with a line in the water. That's the whole point. He pulled out his phone, made some notes. I'll have my attorney send proof of funds by 5 this afternoon. Owen, draft me terms by end of business today. Standard inspection, but I'm not going to nitpick. This property is about location and potential, not perfect cabinets. After he left, Owen turned to me with a grin. That's your buyer. He's in. I can feel it. Just like that, I asked. Just like that, Owen confirmed. When someone goes quiet on the deck, they're already living there in their head. Everything after that is just paperwork. Tuesday brought another showing, this one, at 1 o'clock. Dr. Robert King, 68, retired surgeon from Boston, looking for a place to decompress after 40 years of emergency rooms and operating theaters. Robert moved through the house differently than Henry had, with a physician's attention to detail. He noticed the slight slope in the floor near the fireplace that we'd always meant to fix. He opened the electrical panel and nodded approvingly at the updated wiring Lorraine and I had done in the 90s. You've kept the wood, he said in the living room, running his hand along the original window frames. People always want to replace everything, but this wood has character. On the deck, he stood in the same spot Henry had stood, looking at the same view, but his response was different. More analytical, less emotional, but just as definitive. I trained under a man who used to say, your duty is to whoever's on the table in front of you, Robert said. Doesn't matter who they are or how they got there. You treat what's in front of you with respect. He gestured at the house. Someone treated this place with respect. I can see it in the choices you made. Where would you want the cottage? Owen asked. I walked to the back corner of the property, 10 paces from the deck where the morning sun would hit first. Here, with a porch facing the water, big enough for 2 chairs and room to think. Robert nodded. I can work with that. My architect will want to see it, but if you like morning light, we'll orient it for morning light. I'll have my banker send proof of funds by 6, Robert said. But if you get a clean offer before mine, take it. I don't want a bidding war. I want to start living here in peace. We drove back to Oakwood in comfortable silence. Owen was already typing on his phone, coordinating with Janine at the title office, making sure every piece of paper was ready to move the moment one of these buyers committed. You're going to get 2 offers, Owen said. Maybe both by tonight. Henry will come in higher because he made his money in business, and that's how he's wired. Robert will come in clean with fewer contingencies because doctors hate uncertainty. Either way, you win. Back in my suite at Oakwood, I felt the phone buzz with a text from Alicia. Dad came home for lunch, found a business card on the hall table, Mallister and Finch title office. He asked Mom if she called them. She said no, he's asking questions. I typed back quickly. What kind of questions? Whether you had any appointments scheduled, whether anyone's been at the house during the day. Mom told him he's being paranoid. I deleted the text thread and sat on the edge of the bed thinking. Terrence had found the card. That meant he was starting to suspect something, starting to ask questions I didn't want him asking until after the sale closed, which meant we needed to move faster. I called Owen. Terrence found evidence someone's been looking at title work, I said. He's suspicious. How suspicious? Asking questions. Not accusations yet, but questions. Owen was quiet for a moment. Okay, here's what we do. I push both buyers for best and final by tomorrow night. We accept Wednesday, open escrow Thursday, close the following Monday. 10 days total. Can you keep your son from getting too curious for 10 days? I can try, I said. Try hard, Owen said. Because if he figures out what we're doing before that deed records with the new owner's name on it, he can make this very complicated very fast. That evening my phone lit up with an email. Proof of funds from Henry Novak. $350,000 clean and ready to wire. 20 minutes later, another email. Proof of funds from Robert King. $340,000 conventional loan pre-approved, no contingencies. I forwarded both to Owen with a single line. Your move. His response came back in under a minute. Game on. I'll have both offers drafted by morning. You pick your buyer by noon tomorrow. Then we run. I lay in the narrow bed in my suite at Oakwood, surrounded by the few possessions they'd decided I needed, and thought about the house that was about to stop being mine legally and start being mine on my own terms. A cottage in the back corner. Morning light. A porch where I could sit and watch the water and know that no one could move me again unless I chose to move. Terrence had made one critical mistake. He'd assumed that being old meant being helpless, that being displaced meant being defeated. He was about to learn the difference between assumptions and reality, and the lesson was going to cost him the house he'd tried to steal. Wednesday morning, my phone rang at 7:30. Terrence's number lit up the screen with the insistence of someone who'd been thinking about something all night and needed answers. Dad, he said without preamble. Did you stop by Mallister and Finch title office recently? My heart rate stayed steady. 30 years of facing down nervous smugglers at the checkpoint had taught me how to keep my voice level when lying was necessary. The tax office sent a notice about an escrow adjustment. I wanted to check if it had been handled properly. Why? Someone left a business card on the hall table, Terrence said, his tone suspicious but not yet accusatory. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay. Everything's fine, I said. You know how tax offices are. Send you notices about nothing just to justify their existence. He made a noncommittal sound. Okay, just checking. How are you settling in at Oakwood? It's fine, I said, keeping my answer short, giving him nothing to grab onto. Good, we'll visit this weekend. Maybe take you out for lunch. Looking forward to it, I lied. After we hung up, I texted Owen. He's asking questions. We need to move faster. Owen's response was immediate. Already on it. Henry accepted terms last night, opening escrow today. Can you get out this afternoon? What time? 2:00. Tell them you need to see your banker about the tax notice. Make it boring and bureaucratic. Nobody questions boring and bureaucratic. At 1:45, I told Karen at the front desk that I needed to visit my bank about a tax matter. She smiled with the practiced patience of someone who'd heard every excuse residents invented to leave the building. Owen's picking you up, she asked, consulting her schedule. My nephew is very responsible, I said. Owen arrived in a different car, this time a blue sedan that looked like it belonged to someone's grandmother. We drove to Mallister and Finch title office, a small brick building tucked between a dental office and a tax preparation service, the kind of place you'd drive past 1,000 times without noticing. Inside, Janine Chen sat behind a desk covered in neat stacks of documents, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every kind of property transaction and wasn't impressed by drama. Mr. Washington, she said, standing to shake my hand. Owen's told me about your situation. Let's verify everything first. She pulled up records on her computer, typed, efficiently, nodded at what she saw. Owner of record James Washington. Transfer date June 2015. Refinance recorded. No liens, no notices, taxes current. You're clean. That's what I needed to hear, I said. Now, Janine continued, pulling out forms. For a fast close, we need a few things. Listing agreement, which Owen has, purchase agreement, which we'll execute today pending your approval of terms, and we need documentation of your mental capacity. Why? I asked, though I already knew. Because if your son decides to challenge this sale, the first thing he'll claim is that you weren't competent to make the decision. Dana's assessment from Saturday helps, but we need something more official. A letter from your primary care physician stating you're capable of making legal and financial decisions. I have an appointment Monday with Dr. Santos, I said. The one Stephanie scheduled without asking me. Perfect, Janine said. Keep that appointment. Get the letter. We'll need it before recording the deed. Owen slid the purchase agreement across the desk. Henry Novak's offer was there in black and white. $350,000 cash, no contingencies. Close in 10 days. Buyer agrees to construct detached accessory dwelling unit per specifications in Exhibit A. Life lease to seller. 90 days interim housing at Lakeside Tower, buyer funded. I read every word twice. Then I signed. Henry already wired the earnest money, Owen said. He's serious. He wants this done. So do I said. Monday morning arrived with the clarity of a plan coming together. I took the shuttle from Oakwood to Dr. Santos's office, the appointment Stephanie had scheduled, the one she thought would prove I needed supervision. Dr. Santos was a woman in her early 50s, calm and professional, who looked at me over reading glasses and said, Mr. Washington, I understand your daughter-in-law scheduled this appointment. Is that correct? It is, I said, without asking me. I see, she said, making a note. And do you feel you need this evaluation? No, I said. But I'd like documentation that I'm competent to make my own decisions because I suspect my family is going to challenge some choices I'm making. She smiled slightly. Fair enough. Let's go through the standard assessment. 30 minutes later, after questions about dates and presidents and counting backwards and drawing clocks, she sat back in her chair. Mr. Washington, you are cognitively intact. Your memory is excellent. Your judgment appears sound. You understand the consequences of decisions. Is there a specific document you need? A letter stating I'm competent to make legal and financial decisions, I said. She typed it up on clinic letterhead, printed it, signed it, and handed it to me. Capacity affirmed. Patient demonstrates clear understanding of complex decisions and long-term planning. No cognitive impairment observed. Patient is competent to execute legal documents including but not limited to contracts, property transfers, and healthcare directives. My daughter-in-law called yesterday, Dr. Santos added, asked if we could do a more extensive evaluation. She used the phrase deeper cognitive assessment. I told her that unless you requested it or I observed concerning symptoms, there was no medical indication for additional testing. Thank you, I said. You're welcome, she said. And Mr. Washington, whatever you're planning, I hope it works out the way you want it to. I delivered the letter to Janine Wednesday afternoon. She made 3 copies, attached one to the purchase agreement, filed one with the title insurance company, and gave one back to me. We're clear to close, she said. Friday at 11. Can you be here? I'll be here, I said. Friday morning I told Karen I was going to the bank again. She barely looked up from her computer. Owen picked me up at 10:30 and we drove to Janine's office where Henry Novak was already waiting, looking relaxed and ready. Mr. Washington, Henry said, shaking my hand. Ready to make this official? More than ready, I said. We sat at Janine's conference table and signed page after page. Purchase agreement, seller's disclosure, lead paint waiver, title insurance, the rider specifying the cottage construction and my life lease. Henry signed with the easy confidence of someone who'd closed dozens of properties. I signed with the careful precision of someone whose entire future depended on these signatures being valid. Earnest money is in escrow, Janine confirmed. Remaining funds will wire Monday morning. Recording happens at noon. By 12:15, the deed will show Henry Novak as owner and this transaction will be complete. What about occupancy? Henry asked. The family living there now. 30 days, Janine said, sliding another document across. Notice to vacate. They have until December 15th to remove themselves and their possessions. After that, it's your property and you can proceed as you see fit. Henry turned to me. I won't make it difficult. They get their full 30 days, but on day 31, my contractor starts on your cottage. Fair enough, I said. We stood, shook hands all around. Owen clapped me on the shoulder. Janine smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd executed a complicated transaction flawlessly. Congratulations, gentlemen, she said. You're about to make someone's weekend very interesting. On the drive back to Oakwood, Owen said, You know they're planning a welcome social for you tomorrow, right? Meet the family event. I heard something about that, I said. Terrence and Stephanie will be there. So will Stephanie's parents. They're all coming to see you settled. I smiled out the window at the passing scenery. Then I guess we should make it memorable. You're going to tell them there? Owen asked. I'm going to tell them exactly where they'll be standing when they learn that the house they're living in isn't mine anymore, I said. Because sometimes the best place to deliver bad news is somewhere public where people have to keep their reactions civilized. You, Owen said with genuine admiration, are playing chess while they're playing checkers. I've been playing chess since before they were born, I said. They just forgot to notice. The welcome social at Oakwood began at 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, a carefully orchestrated event designed to make new residents feel integrated into the community. The activities room had been decorated with fall flowers, and the staff had laid out cookies and punch on tables covered with cheerful tablecloths. A piano in the corner played soft music from a speaker designed to look like it was coming from the Keys. I stood near the window wearing the one good shirt Stephanie had packed for me, watching the parking lot. At 4:15, Terrence's SUV pulled in, followed closely by a silver Lexus I recognized as belonging to Stephanie's parents, Gary and Patricia Wilson. They came in together, a unified front of family concern. Terrence in a blazer that said he'd come from something important. Stephanie in a dress that said she'd made an effort. Gary and Patricia in coordinated beige, the uniform of retired people who'd decided comfort and respectability could coexist. Dad, Terrence said, coming over with that smile he used on clients, warm but calculated. The place looks nice. You settling in okay? Learning the rhythm, I said non-committally. Patricia hugged me with the stiff affection of someone performing for an audience. James, you look well. The routine must be agreeing with you. Routine has its place, I said. Karen, the activities coordinator, tapped a microphone and invited everyone to share a story about a time they'd learned something the hard way. People began talking about burned casseroles and missed flights and lessons that came with age. The room filled with that particular kind of polite conversation that happens when strangers are forced into community. I caught Frank across the room. He lifted his coffee cup in a small salute. Owen stood near the door, pretending to be just another visitor, but his eyes found mine, and he nodded once. It was time. Terrence, Stephanie, I said quietly, can I borrow you for a few minutes? There's someone I'd like you to meet. Terrence looked surprised but pleased, probably thinking I'd made a friend, that I was adapting to my new life in this facility. Sure, Dad, of course. We moved to a quieter corner of the room near the windows that looked out on the courtyard. Henry Novak stood there in khakis and a pullover sweater, looking relaxed and comfortable, a man at ease with himself. Terrence, Stephanie, I said. This is Henry Novak. Henry extended his hand with genuine friendliness. Pleasure to meet you both. Terrence shook it automatically, his real estate training kicking in. Nice to meet you. Are you visiting someone here? In a manner of speaking, Henry said, glancing at me. I took a breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to say, the satisfaction of it settling in my chest like something earned. I wanted to tell you both here where we're in public and everyone needs to stay civil. I sold the house. The words hung in the air like a bell that had been rung and couldn't be unrung. Stephanie's face went blank, processing, delayed by disbelief. Terrence's mouth opened and closed once before he found words. I'm sorry, he said. What? I opened the folder I'd been holding and pulled out the first document. The deed was recorded yesterday afternoon. Funds wired to escrow. Official closing is Monday at 11. You're welcome to attend if you'd like to understand the process, but the process is complete. I handed him Janine's confirmation email, the one with the recording number and the timestamp showing 3:45 p.m. Friday. Terrence stared at it like it was written in a language he didn't speak. You can't just sell a house. You're in assisted living. I need my own consent, which I gave, I said, pulling out Dana's assessment. Cognitively sound, independent in all activities of daily living, oriented to time, place, and person, capable of making complex decisions. Stephanie found her voice sharp and rising. When did you do this? How did you? While you were rearranging my house and scheduling my medical appointments without asking, I said calmly. While you were planning my life like I was a piece of furniture that needed relocating. I pulled out the inventory list, the one they'd both signed. 30 days for current occupants to vacate. Your signatures are right here, acknowledging you removed my property and placed it in storage. Very helpful documentation, actually. Terrence's face had gone through confusion and was landing on anger. Dad, you can't just... I can, I said, my voice still level but with steel underneath. Owner of record me, no liens, no guardianship, no power of attorney because I refused to sign it. Just a legal property owner executing a legal sale of his legal property. Where are we supposed to go? Stephanie demanded, her voice cracking slightly. You have salaries, I said. You have Stephanie's parents who just sold their condo and presumably have proceeds. And you have 30 days, which is more notice than you gave me when you showed up with 6 suitcases. Patricia pushed her way into the conversation, her face flushed with indignation. This is outrageous. We are family. You can't just throw family out on the street. Exactly, I said, turning to face her directly. We are family, which is why you can be family somewhere else. May I suggest an apartment on Birch Street? I hear they're available. Gary stepped up beside his wife. You're being unreasonable. We were trying to help you. Help starts with asking, not assuming, I said. Help means respecting someone's autonomy, not taking it away because it's more convenient for you. Stephanie's hands were shaking. You planned this. While we were taking care of you, making sure you were safe, you were planning to take back control of my own life, I finished. Yes, I planned it very carefully. Henry, who'd been standing quietly through this exchange, stepped forward and offered his hand to Terrence. Mr. Washington, I want you to know I'll be a fair neighbor for the next 30 days. No contractors, no changes, no pressure. You get your full time to find a place and move your family. But on day 31, my construction crew starts on the guest cottage for your father. Guest cottage. Terrence repeated the words, not making sense to him. In the back corner, I said, 10 paces from the deck, 2 bedrooms, kitchen, bathroom, porch. Built by Henry per our contract with a life lease that means I stay on that land as long as I choose to. You're building a house, Stephanie said, still catching up. On the property, while you find somewhere else to live, yes, I said. I'll be at Lakeside Tower for 90 days while construction happens. Henry's funding that too. Then I move into my cottage and you visit when you're invited, which will depend entirely on how you conduct yourselves over the next month. Janine appeared from wherever she'd been waiting, professional and precise. The closing is Monday at 11 at my office. You're welcome to attend if you have questions about the process, but as Mr. Washington said, the sale is complete. Recording number is on that sheet. You can verify it with the county if you'd like. This can't be legal, Gary said, his voice desperate. It's entirely legal, Janine replied. Owner sold property he solely owned while demonstrably competent. Standard transaction. The only unusual element is the life lease arrangement, and that's not unusual enough to invalidate anything. Terrence turned to me, his face doing something complicated, moving through anger towards something that might be the beginning of understanding. You did this because we moved you here. I did this because you forgot I was a person, I said quietly. You forgot I had a name on a deed. You forgot I spent 30 years inspecting cargo for contraband, which means I know how to spot people trying to smuggle things past me. And you forgot that being old doesn't mean being helpless. We were trying to keep you safe, he said, his voice smaller now. You were trying to take my house, I corrected. Safety was the story you told yourselves to feel better about it. Stephanie's parents need a place to live, and my house was convenient. That's the truth. The rest was just packaging. Stephanie looked at Henry with something like desperation. You can't actually want this. An old man living on the property. That's going to affect your resale value. Henry smiled patiently. Ma'am, I'm 62 years old and I just bought my last house. I'm not worried about resale value. I'm worried about having a place where I can fish in peace and not feel like I took something from someone who deserved to keep it. The room had gone quieter around us, other residents and their families pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. This was the most interesting thing that had happened at a welcome social in months. We'll fight this, Patricia said, but her voice had lost its certainty. You'll lose, I said simply. But you're welcome to try. My capacity has been documented by 2 medical professionals. The sale was executed according to all legal requirements. The buyer paid cash and has already wired funds. There's nothing to fight except your own embarrassment that you underestimated me. Alicia appeared at the edge of our group, her eyes wide. She looked at me with something between shock and admiration. Grandpa? Hi, sweetheart, I said. Sorry you had to hear it this way, but your parents needed to hear it in a place where they'd have to be civil. She looked at her father, then at her mother, then back at me. You sold the house. I did, I confirmed. And you're building a cottage. I am. She nodded slowly, processing. Then she said to her parents, he tried to tell you. You just didn't listen. Alicia, stay out of this, Stephanie snapped. No, Alicia said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in weeks. Grandpa was right. You don't get to take someone's life and call it helping. Brandon appeared behind his sister, looking between the adults with the wary expression of a teenager who'd just realized his family was more complicated than he'd thought. "Are we moving?" "Yes," Terrence said heavily. "We're moving." Frank appeared at my elbow with 2 cups of punch. "Thought you might need something to drink after all that talking," he said, handing me one. "Frank Morrison," I said to my family. "My colleague from Customs. He helped me understand my options." "Options we didn't give you," Terrence said, and in his voice I heard the first crack in the facade, the beginning of understanding what they'd actually done. "Options are what you have when you're treated like an adult," I said. "I had to create my own because you decided to treat me like a problem that needed solving." The social continued around us, but our corner stayed frozen in this moment, this reckoning. Finally, Terrence said, "Can we talk? Really talk, not here, but somewhere private." 30 days, I said. "You have 30 days to find a place and move. After that, we can talk about whether you've learned anything worth talking about." He nodded slowly, then turned and walked toward the exit. Stephanie followed her parents, trailing behind all of them, moving like people who'd just had something fundamental shift beneath their feet. Alicia stayed. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm proud of you, Grandpa." "I'm proud of you too," I said, "for telling me the truth when nobody else would." She hugged me quick and fierce, then followed her family out into the parking lot where their cars waited like escape vessels. Henry raised his punch cup to mine. "To new beginnings. To correction," I said, echoing Frank's word from a week ago. "Not revenge, correction." "Better word," Henry agreed. Owen came over grinning. That went exactly as brutal as I expected. "They'll figure it out," I said. "Or they won't. Either way, I've got a cottage being built in 90 days and a porch that faces the morning sun." "And fishing whenever you want it," Henry added. "And fishing whenever I want it," I agreed. The social continued. People told their stories about lessons learned. Karen served more cookies. The piano kept playing from its speaker. And I stood in the corner with Frank and Owen and Henry, feeling lighter than I'd felt in a month. Because the game wasn't just over. I'd won. And sometimes winning looks like taking back what was always yours. Monday morning began with what I thought would be routine. The closing at 11 paperwork signed, deed transferred, everything official and final. I was sitting in my suite at Oakwood reviewing the documents one more time when Alicia knocked on my door. Her face told me something was wrong before she said a word. "Grandpa," she said, coming in and closing the door behind her. "Mom filed something." She handed me a manila envelope, the kind that comes with legal weight. Inside was a petition officially stamped and dated from Friday afternoon, just hours after our closing. Petition for guardianship of James Washington. Petitioner Stephanie Wilson. Supporting affidavits from Patricia Wilson and Gary Wilson detailing concerns about cognitive decline, vulnerability to manipulation, and inability to manage complex financial decisions. I read it twice, my hands steady despite the anger building in my chest. They'd gone nuclear. If they couldn't stop the sale, they'd try to prove I wasn't competent to have made it in the first place. "There's more," Alicia said quietly. "They filed an ex parte motion for emergency temporary guardianship. Tried to get a judge to grant it immediately without you present." "And," I asked, though I could see from her face what the answer was. "Denied," she said. The judge looked at Dr. Santos's letter and Dana's assessment and said there was no evidence of incapacity warranting emergency action, but there's still a hearing scheduled, 2 weeks from Thursday. I sat on the edge of the bed, the petition heavy in my hands. "Your mother really thinks she can convince a judge I'm incompetent." "Her lawyer thinks they have a shot," Alicia said. "The argument is that you made a dramatic financial decision immediately after being placed in assisted living, that you were influenced by people with financial interests, that the speed of the transaction suggests impaired judgment. The speed of the transaction suggests I knew what I was doing and didn't want to give them time to interfere," I said. "I know that, you know that, but they're going to make it look different." I stood up, pacing the small room. "Does your father know about this?" "I don't think so," Alicia said. "This has Mom's fingerprints all over it, and her parents. Dad's been quiet since Saturday." "I think he's processing." "He needs to process faster," I said. "Because if this petition goes forward, even if I win, it delays everything. The cottage, my move to Lakeside, everything freezes while we fight this in court." Alicia's phone buzzed. She looked at it and her expression shifted. "Owen just texted me. There's a problem at the house." We got there 20 minutes later, Owen picking us up in his sedan. What I saw made my blood pressure spike. A red notice posted on a sawhorse in the front yard. Stop work order in bold letters, official city seal dated that morning. Henry was standing in the driveway looking frustrated. A woman in her 40s with a hard hat and a clipboard was taking measurements near the property line. And a young inspector, maybe 25, stood by a city truck looking miserable about whatever he'd been ordered to do. "Mr. Washington," Henry said when he saw me, "someone filed a complaint. Anonymous. Claims were encroaching on setback requirements and possibly disturbing wetlands." "Wetlands," I said. "This yard has been mowed grass for 40 years. The architect, a woman named Lisa Chen, who Henry had hired, came over with her own clipboard. The complaint alleges we're building too close to the property line and that the corner where the cottage is planned might contain protected wetland area. Both are false. We have the survey, we have soil samples, but the city has to investigate every complaint." The young inspector approached, looking like he wished he was anywhere else. "Mr. Washington, I'm sorry. I had to post the stop order pending review. It's policy when there's an allegation." "Who filed the complaint?" I asked. He checked his tablet. "Anonymous tip through the city website, filed at 6 this morning. 6 a.m., right after business hours opened. Someone had been waiting, planning this." "This is harassment," Henry said flatly. "We're in full compliance and someone knows it." A white sedan pulled up, and an older woman got out, someone with authority written in the way she carried herself. She wore slacks and a city badge that said, "Senior Inspector." "I'm Carla Martinez," she said, shaking hands with Lisa. "I got a call that there was an issue here. Let me see the survey and your permits." Lisa handed over a folder thick with documentation. Carla reviewed it, standing right there in the driveway, flipping through pages with the efficiency of someone who'd seen every kind of building dispute. After 5 minutes, she walked to where the young inspector had placed his measurements. She checked the property pins, walked the perimeter where the cottage foundation was marked, examined the soil. Then she walked back to the sawhorse, pulled the red notice off, and wrote something on her own clipboard. "In compliance," she said clearly, handing the young inspector a signed form. "No setback violation. No wetland disturbance. This property has been developed residential for decades. Complaint is without merit." She turned to me. "Mr. Washington, you're free to proceed. I'll note in the city system that this complaint was investigated and found baseless. If another anonymous complaint comes in about this address, it'll get flagged." "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me," Carla said. "Thank whoever taught you to document everything. Your permits are perfect." As she was leaving, Patricia's silver Lexus pulled up. She got out with the righteous indignation of someone who believes rules only apply to other people. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, pointing at the construction markers. "You can't just build whatever you want without proper approval." "We have proper approval," Lisa said calmly. "Permits issued, inspections passed, complaints investigated and dismissed." "This is my daughter's house," Patricia said. "No, ma'am," Henry said. "This is my house, as of Friday, and your daughter has 26 more days to vacate it." Patricia's face flushed. "We'll see about that." After she left, my phone rang. Terrence. "Dad," he said, his voice strained. "I just found out about the guardianship petition. I didn't know. Stephanie and her parents filed it without telling me." "I believe you," I said, surprising myself. "I'm going to talk to her," he said. "This is wrong. You're not incompetent. I was angry about the house, but this is different. This is lying to a court." "Then show up to that hearing," I said. "Tell the judge the truth, that I'm exactly who I've always been, that the only thing that changed is I stopped letting you make decisions for me." "I will," he said. "I promise. And Dad, I'll talk to Stephanie about withdrawing it entirely." "Do that," I said, "because if this goes to a hearing, I'm bringing every piece of documentation I have. Dana's assessment, Dr. Santos's letter, the signed inventory you both acknowledged, the deposit receipt in your name. Every single thing that proves this was your plan, not my incapacity." "I understand," he said quietly. Wednesday afternoon, Alicia texted me a screenshot. Court filing from Stephanie's attorney. Motion to withdraw petition for guardianship. Attached was a statement saying the petitioner had received additional information suggesting the respondent retained full capacity and the petition was filed in error based on incomplete medical information. Translation, Alicia wrote. Dad made Mom back down. Thursday morning, another text. Judge dismissed without prejudice. It's over. Without prejudice meant they could theoretically file again, but only if they had new evidence, which they wouldn't because there wasn't any. I called Terrence. "Thank you," I said simply. "I should have stopped it before it was filed," he said. "I should have been paying attention to what Stephanie was planning instead of just being angry that you outsmarted us." "You're learning," I said. "That's what matters." "Can I come see the cottage site?" he asked. "Not to interfere, just to see what you're building." "Saturday," I said. 10 a.m., bring work gloves if you want to help." There was a long pause. "You want me to help?" "You're my son," I said. "And this cottage is going to need more than 2 hands to build right. Might as well be yours." When I hung up, I looked out the window of my Oakwood suite at the parking lot that had felt like exile 2 weeks ago, and now felt like a temporary staging area for the next chapter. The pushback had failed. The petition was withdrawn. The stop work order was lifted. And in 90 days, I'd have a porch facing the morning sun built on land that was mine by right, not by permission. Sometimes correction requires patience. Sometimes it requires paperwork. And sometimes it requires watching your opponents realize they've been playing the wrong game all along. I called Lisa. "When can you break ground?" "Monday morning," she said. "Weather's good. We'll have your foundation poured by Wednesday." "Then let's build a house," I said. Monday morning broke clear and cold, the kind of November day where you can see your breath, but the sun promises to warm things up by noon. I stood at the edge of what would become my cottage, watching the excavator dig the foundation, while Lisa directed the operator with hand signals that looked like she was conducting an orchestra. At 10 o'clock, Terrence's SUV pulled up. He got out wearing jeans and work boots I didn't know he owned, carrying a thermos of coffee, and looking uncertain about his welcome. "You came," I said. "You invited me," he replied. "Wasn't sure if you meant it." "I don't say things I don't mean," I said. "Not anymore." Lisa came over, wiping dirt off her hands. "You must be Terrence. Your father talks about you." "Good things, I hope," Terrence said. "Honest things," Lisa said. "Which is better?" "You here to watch or work?" "Work," Terrence said, "if you'll have me." "Can you hold a board steady while I check level?" she asked. "I can do that," he said. For the next 2 hours, I watched my son take instruction from a woman half his age, learning to hold things at the right angle to strike a nail true without bending it to measure twice before cutting once. He made mistakes, bent nails, measured wrong, had to redo a cut. "Feels like building a sentence," he said at one point, looking at the frame taking shape. "Get one word wrong, and the whole thing collapses." "That's exactly what it is," Lisa said. "Except with sentences you can edit. With houses, you have to get it right the first time or tear it down and start over." Terrence looked at me when she said that, and I saw understanding pass across his face. Some things you can't edit. Some things require tearing down and rebuilding from the foundation up. At noon, another car pulled up. Stephanie got out carrying a covered dish, moving carefully like someone approaching a border they weren't sure they could cross. "I brought lunch," she said. "Carrot cake. My grandmother's recipe." I looked at the dish, then at her face, seeing something different than the woman who'd marked my photos with painter's tape. Something more tentative, more human. "Then it remembers how to forgive," I said, taking the dish. "Thank you." We ate sitting on lumber, the 5 of us, contractor and architect and buyer and family, passing around slices of cake that tasted like someone had put effort into making amends. "The house is different without you in it," Stephanie said quietly. "Emptier. We thought we were making room for family, but all we did was push out the person who made it feel like a home." "You can still make it a home," I said. "Just not my home." "We're looking at a place on Maple Street," she said. 3 bedrooms, small yard. We can afford it without help." "That's good," I said. Independence suits people. The weeks that followed established a rhythm. Monday through Friday, the crew worked on the cottage. Foundation poured and cured. Framing went up studs and joists and rafters, turning drawings into 3-dimensional space. By Thanksgiving, the roof was on and the windows were in, and you could stand inside and imagine what it would feel like when walls and floors made it real. Terrence came every Saturday, sometimes with Brandon, who turned out to have an unexpected talent for reading blueprints. Stephanie came less often, but when she did, she asked questions about how things worked instead of suggesting how they should be different. Alicia took a part-time job at Janine's office, filing property records and learning how ownership transfers from person to person through paper and signatures and stamps. "I'm thinking about law school," she told me one afternoon. "But property law, not the kind where you sue people. The kind where you help them keep what's theirs." "That's good work," I said. "The world needs people who understand that paper can protect as well as prosecute." In mid-December, while sorting through boxes of things Terrence and Stephanie had moved into storage, I found an envelope I didn't recognize. Plain manila sealed with tape that had gone yellow with age. On the front, in Lorraine's handwriting, "For when the house gets too big." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter, 3 pages dated 13 years ago, just after her cancer diagnosis, when we'd both known time was becoming finite. "My dearest James," it began. "If you're reading this, I didn't get to grow old enough to see you need it. But I know you and I know how our son loves us, and I know that love sometimes forgets to ask permission before it tries to help." I sat down on a stack of lumber reading words my wife had written for a future she wouldn't see. "The house will feel too big without me. Don't let them convince you the solution is to leave it. Build something smaller, near the water where you can hear it. 2 chairs for morning coffee, a porch where rain sounds right. Make sure the roof has a good slope. You always said flat roofs are for people who don't respect weather." I laughed, tears running down my face, because she'd known. She'd known exactly what would happen and exactly what I'd need to do about it. "If Terrence tries to take care of you by taking away your choices, forgive him, but don't surrender. He means well, but he forgets you're the man who taught him how to stand up. Show him again. And when you're sitting on that porch in your little house, save a chair for me. I'll be there in the morning light and the sound of the water, and the way you still take your coffee too hot and too black." The letter ended with her signature, the L in Lorraine, extending into a line that she used to say was her way of signing with a hug. I called Terrence. "Come to the site, now. Bring Stephanie." When they arrived, I handed Terrence the letter without explanation. He read it standing in the frame of what would be my living room, Stephanie reading over his shoulder. When he finished, he looked up with tears in his eyes. "She knew. Mom knew exactly who we'd be and exactly what you'd need. She knew you loved me enough to make mistakes," I said. "And she knew I loved you enough to forgive them if you learned from them." Stephanie wiped her eyes. "She wrote this 13 years ago. She understood people," I said. "Better than most. Better than me sometimes." Terrence handed the letter back carefully, like it was made of something more fragile than paper. "I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it." "I know," I said. "Now help me build this porch so your mother's chair has somewhere to sit." By Christmas, the cottage had walls and doors and a kitchen where appliances would go. By New Year's, the bathroom was tiled and the floors were down. And by the end of January, Lisa handed me a piece of paper with an official stamp. "Certificate of occupancy," she said. "You're legal to move in." I looked at the paper, then at the cottage that had been a plan and was now a place, and felt something settle that had been unsettled since 6 suitcases landed in my living room 4 months ago. "Let's go home," I said. Moving day came on a Saturday in late January, the kind of winter morning where frost makes everything look clean and new. I packed the few things I'd accumulated at Lakeside Tower into 2 boxes, said goodbye to the staff who'd helped me through those 90 days, and met Owen at the curb. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "I've been ready," I said. The cottage sat in the back corner of the property, exactly where I'd imagined it, white siding with dark green trim, a metal roof that would sing when rain hit it, and a porch deep enough for 2 chairs and the space between them where conversations happen. Inside, everything was simple and exactly right. 2 bedrooms, 1 for sleeping and 1 for the life that happens when you're not sleeping. A kitchen with counters at the right height and cabinets I could reach without a step stool. A bathroom with a walk-in shower and grab bars that didn't look institutional, just practical. And windows everywhere letting in light and the view of water that had been my companion for 40 years. By noon, people started arriving. Frank came first, carrying a bottle of something that wasn't wine but would do the job. Owen brought a plant he swore was hard to kill. Janine arrived with a folder of documents proving everything was legal and recorded and mine. Dana from Oakwood brought cookies and a card signed by residents who barely knew me but appreciated a good escape story. Calvin from the marina showed up with a fishing pole. "For when you remember how," he said. Henry came last, carrying nothing but a grin and a sense of satisfaction that comes from being part of something that worked out right. We gathered on the porch, this collection of people who'd helped me take back my life through paper and planning and patience. Henry raised his glass. "To correction," he said, and we drank to that old word that meant more than revenge ever could. I was about to propose a second toast when a car I recognized pulled into the driveway. Patricia Wilson, alone, carrying a tin with both hands like an offering. She walked up to the porch slowly, her usual confidence replaced with something that looked like humility. "James," she said, "I brought cookies. Shortbread, not gray." The joke landed softer than she'd probably intended, but it landed. I took the tin. "Thank you. I was wrong," she said, the words clearly costing her something. "About all of it. I thought safety meant control, that helping meant deciding, that being older meant being less." "Safety is letting someone make their own coffee without correcting where they keep the spoons," I said. She almost smiled. "I don't know how to be that kind of person." "Practice," I said. "Starting at Thanksgiving. You're invited if you can sit at a table and let other people make mistakes without commentary." "I'll try," she said, and from her that was probably the best offer I'd get. After she left, Terrence and Stephanie arrived with Brandon and Alicia. They'd moved to Maple Street the week before, into a house that was smaller than mine had been, but entirely theirs. "How's the new place?" I asked. "Good," Terrence said. "Turns out independence feels better than I expected." "Funny how that works," I said. What I didn't tell him, and wouldn't tell him for a long time, was that the house on Maple Street was owned by Henry through a property management company, and the deposit had been quietly paid by a wire transfer from my account to Henry's, who'd reduced their rent to something they could actually afford. Henry called it his hobby, helping people learn in public. I called it making sure my son didn't end up on the street while learning the lessons he needed to learn. "Oh," Alicia said, pulling an envelope from her bag. "I found this at Janine's office. It's addressed to me, and Brandon filed 13 years ago." She opened it and read, her eyes getting wider. "It's from Grandma, an authorization for a CD in our names. She set it aside for college or first apartments or whatever we needed when we got older." "How much?" Brandon asked. "Enough," Alicia said. "Enough that I don't have to worry about law school loans." Terrence looked at me. "Did you know?" "Not until recently," I said. "Your mother was good at planning for futures she wouldn't see." We stood on the porch as the afternoon light turned everything gold, this family that had broken and was slowly learning how to be whole again, not by going back to what we were, but by building something new from pieces that still fit. "Thank you," Terrence said quietly, "for not giving up on us." "You're my son," I said. "Giving up isn't in the job description." Later, after everyone left and the sun dropped behind the trees, I sat in one of the two chairs and looked at the lake turning silver in twilight. The second chair stayed empty, but not really empty. Lorraine was there the way she'd promised she would be in the morning light, and the sound of water, and the knowledge that I'd done what she'd known I'd need to do. Build small. Stay close to the water. Make sure the roof sounds right. I'd done all of it. And sitting there in the cold with my coffee going cold in my hands, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Home. Not the building. The feeling. The sense that this space was mine because I'd chosen it, fought for it, built it on my own terms. The revenge I'd thought I wanted had turned into something better. Correction. Balance. The restoration of what should have been all along, and that I decided was worth more than anger ever could have bought. That evening, after everyone had gone and the cottage settled into its first night of being inhabited, I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket Alicia had brought, watching darkness claim the lake inch by inch. The temperature had dropped with the sun, cold enough that my breath made small clouds, but I wasn't ready to go inside yet. I'd brought out my old record player, the one Terrence and Stephanie had packed away, thinking I wouldn't need it at Oakwood. Now it sat on the small table between the two chairs, playing Ella Fitzgerald singing about summertime, her voice warm enough to push back against January. Around 9 o'clock, rain started. Not the angry kind that pounds and demands attention, but the steady, patient kind that knows it has all night. It hit the metal roof with exactly the sound Lisa had promised, a soft percussion that turned the porch into a room with the best ceiling in the world. I closed my eyes and listened to rain and Ella and the lake doing its quiet work against the shore, and I thought about the word Frank had given me 4 months ago. Correction, not revenge, which burns hot and leaves ash. Correction which restores balance, which puts things back where they belong. I hadn't destroyed anyone. Terrence still had his family, his job, his dignity. Stephanie still had her marriage and her plans just redirected towards something she actually owned. Patricia and Gary still had their daughter, though perhaps with a better understanding of where helping ends and controlling begins. What I'd taken back wasn't theirs. It was mine. My house sold to someone who'd treat it right. My autonomy proven in documents and capacity letters, and the simple act of making decisions that others had to respect. My life no longer subject to other people's calendars and assumptions. The red scarf Lorraine had loved, the one I'd found in the boxes of things they'd packed, now hung on a hook by the cottage door. In the porch light it moved slightly, catching wind that snuck between the railings. "We did it," I said out loud to the empty chair beside me, to the scarf that remembered her shoulders, to whatever remained of Lorraine in this place we'd loved together. Built something small near the water. 2 chairs. Roof sounds perfect. The scarf lifted and fell like someone nodding, and I smiled because I knew it was just wind, and I knew it was more than wind, and both things could be true at the same time. Inside the main house, lights were on in what used to be my bedroom. Henry was probably reading, settling into his first weeks of ownership, learning the quirks of old pipes and the way the wind hit the north wall. In a few weeks, he'd start fishing from the dock. By spring, we'd probably sit out there together, 2 old men with lines in the water, talking about nothing and everything. On Maple Street, Terrence and Stephanie were learning to live within their means, to make decisions without assuming someone else's resources would catch them if they fell. They'd be fine. They were learning. And learning, I'd discovered, was more valuable than never making mistakes in the first place. The rain picked up, drumming louder, and I pulled the blanket tighter and thought about home. Not the building behind me, though I loved it, not the land beneath it, though it was mine. Home was this, the freedom to sit in weather. I'd chosen to sit in drinking coffee. I'd made the way I liked it, listening to music I'd selected on a porch I'd designed in a space no one could take from me, because I'd built it with paper and patience and the kind of stubbornness that looks like weakness until it proves it's not. I am home, I thought. Not because a house has my name on the deed, but because my life has my name on it again. Because I get to decide what time dinner is, and whether the coffee is too old, and who sits in the chair beside me. The record ended, and the needle lifted itself with a soft click. The rain continued. The lake answered. And I sat in the space between them, exactly where I belonged, exactly where I'd fought to be. Correction achieved. Balance restored. Life reclaimed. And that, I decided, was enough. In Black families, the pressure to take care of your elders runs deep-rooted in generations who couldn't trust systems to protect them. But care without consent becomes captivity. James didn't fight his family with anger, he fought with preparation. The deed, the capacity letter, the inventory, these were his weapons against assumptions disguised as love. His son learned what many children of aging parents must respect isn't taking over someone's life for their own good. It's standing beside them while they choose their own path. And sometimes correction requires you to sell the house out from under good intentions before they bury you in a room you didn't pick. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know where you're watching from and tell me what you would have done in James's situation.